Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Giridvaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Giridvaradhari Yashoda Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Shubham Subhadaraj Sto Desert Mat AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shubham Subhadaraj Sto Desert Mat Bhakti Siddhanta Sarita Gaur Prabhupada Ki Go Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 13, The Descendants of Dhruva Maharaj, Text 4. Sadharma Shilai Purushai Bhagavan Yagya Purusha Ijamano Bhaktimata Naradena Rutakila Sadharma Shilai Purushai Bhagavan Yagya Purusha Ijamano Bhaktimata Naradena Ritakila Swadharma Shila Purusha Bhagavan Yagya Purusha Ijamano Bhaktimata Naradena Ritakila Swadharma Shilai, executing sacrificial duties. Purushai, by the men. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yagya Purusha, the enjoyer of all sacrifice. Ijamana, being worshipped. Bhakti Mata, by the devotee. Naradena, by Narada. Irita, describe. Kila, indeed. Translation. While all the prachetas were executing religious rituals and sacrificial ceremonies, and thus worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his satisfaction, the great sage Narada described the transcendental qualities of Dhruva Maharaj. Purport. Narada Muni is always glorifying the pastimes of the Lord. In this verse, we see that not only does he glorify the Lord, but he also likes to glorify the devotees of the Lord. The great sage Narada's mission is to broadcast the devotional service of the Lord. For this purpose, he has compiled the Narada Pancharatra, a directory of devotional service, so that devotees can always take information about how to execute devotional service and thus engage 24 hours a day in performing sacrifices for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has created 4 orders of social life, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. In the Narada Pancharatra, it is very clearly described how each of the social orders can please the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Sway sway karmanya bidata, samsiddhim labate nara. By executing one's prescribed duties, one can please the Supreme Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also, it is stated, Swanushtatasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. The perfection of duty is to see that by discharging one's specific duties, one satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the prachetas were performing sacrifices according to this direction, Narada Muni was satisfied to see these activities, and he also wanted to glorify Dhruva Maharaj in that sacrificial arena. Translation again. While all the prachetas were executing religious rituals and sacrificial ceremonies, and thus worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his satisfaction, the great sage Narada described the transcendental qualities of Dhruva Maharaj. Om Agana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're getting insight into real human civilization. in which there is discussion of the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if people have no knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they don't have much to discuss. And in that way, their attempts at Dharma, their attempts at religion, their attempts at spiritual knowledge become very shallow and easily distorted by material desires. So we need to understand the superlative nature of Bhagavad Dharma. When you have information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you have been blessed. You can understand, as I was explaining to a group of brahmacharis Friday night, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead for many reasons, actually unlimited reasons. One reason that should stick to your mind is that Krishna is complete. His completeness means that he's not only the unlimited, but he's also present as the limited. So what is the limited? The living entities, his parts, as well as the material energy. How can Krishna be Om Purnam, perfect and complete, if he's just unlimited? He also has the limited. How can Krishna be perfect and complete if he's simply the complete whole? Therefore, he also has parts. Not only does the Supreme Personality of Godhead have parts, but he also expands himself into other complete wholes. This is truly the meaning of perfect and complete. And that's just the beginning. Krishna is full of all flavors, full of all pleasurable tastes. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his various pastimes can display the perfection of anger, as Lord Nrsimhadev. Unlimited anger. No demigods, even Brahma, Shiva, even Lakshmi Devi could soothe that anger of Lord Nrsimhadev because it's unlimited. So this is understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, rather than just using shallow terms or abstractions or vagueness. You get in-depth knowledge from Srimad Bhagavatam. What is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What are the living entities? What is the material energy? What is the spiritual world? And you learn all about the different regions of the material world, as well as the different regions of the spiritual world. So this is a blessing. This is a benediction. Of course, we have to take advantage of this benediction. Actually, to be a devotee means to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, you might say someone can be a very sincere devotee, but doesn't read or doesn't have any ability for studying or retaining what he or she reads. But still, because there's no impediment to bhakti, Krishna, impressed by your sincerity, can enlighten you through the heart. But you shouldn't use that as an excuse. I won't read. I won't try to understand Krishna because he'll just enlighten me through my heart. The point is that there is no material barrier to bhakti. Look at Prahlad Maharaj. He was 5 years old, showing you that anytime, any place, anywhere, someone can make spiritual advancement. And of course, remember how Prahlad Maharaj was spiritually energized by Narada Muni while Prahlad was in the womb of his mother. Again, showing you no material barriers if you're really sincere and determined. So Dhruva Maharaj's example shows us what seriousness and determination can do for us. And he's used as an example to inspire us to understand that we can go back to Krishna in this very lifetime if we are serious and determined. Sometimes devotees become discouraged, believe it or not, by hearing about these great devotees, greatest devotees, Prahlad, Dhruva Maharaj, or they read Chaitanya Charitamrita about the extraordinary associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they think, what's the point? We can't be like that. Why are we being tantalized, even tortured with these presentations of the greatest devotees when we can't be like that? And we're struggling so much in our routine day-to-day affairs of material life and spiritual life. So what's the point in hearing about these great devotees? Well, first of all, they are demonstrating to you the peak potential of bhakti. Peak potential means experiences of bhakti that are at the top. So you say, okay, they're at the top, but we're at the bottom. Why should we hear about these accounts when we're so much at the bottom? But by hearing about the peak performers, you become blessed and purified. This is why Narada is speaking about Dhruva Maharaj at the sacrificial arena where the Prachetas have gathered. And they are descendants in the line of Dhruva Maharaj. So Narada Muni has visited that sacrificial arena, and in 3 verses in the previous chapter, chapter 12, Narada Muni presents the glories of Dhruva Maharaj, happily and eagerly. In this way, Narada Muni is showing us how to delight in the Vaishnava sport of appreciating and glorifying devotees. The more we make that a major part of our life, the more Krishna becomes pleased with us. We need to understand the peak potential of bhakti. And by our attempt to understand it, just by hearing about it, or just by repeating it to others, we make spiritual advancement. So it's not hopeless. Why do we hear about this when these devotees are so far beyond us? What's the use? You say like that, and then what happens? You end up hearing from struggling devotees who, it's not possible, no one chants, no one has time to read, no one lasts in bhakti, no one goes on through their whole lifetime. So you take your pick. You want to hear from the peak performers or do you want to hear from the slackers? Of course, we have sympathy for the slackers, but my point is that you'll have to hear from someone and you'll have to hear about someone. So why not hear about Prahlad or Dhruva? Become inspired. And by your hearing about them, you become purified. This is why bhakti is compared to a fire, because a fire burns stuff. So bhakti burns up sinful reactions, and it also burns up material desires. Narada Muni is teaching the Pancharatrika system of bhakti, centered on deity worship. As Prabhupada explains in the purport, there are two systems of bhakti, the Pancharatrika and the Bhagavat Marg. One is about Archana, especially, as the central focus. And then the other is about Bhagavat Katha, talking about, hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and especially spreading Krishna's glories to others. What is unique about what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us, and as it's come down through parampara, is that we have it both ways. We have both the Pancharatrika Marga and the Bhagavat Marga. In this way, you have every opportunity to be a strong devotee. You have the deity worship and you have the kirtan. Kirtan doesn't simply mean music. It also means this right now is kirtan, talking about Krishna and hearing about Krishna. And then there is Sankirtan, the congregational spreading of Krishna's glories. So this is how we have every opportunity to be serious and determined if we want to. You have the Pancharatrika Marg, the path of focus mainly on deity worship, and you have the Bhagavat Marga, the path focused on Krishna's glories, vibrating Krishna's glories amongst devotees and beyond. So this is how fortunate we are. Another thing to note in Narada Muni's visiting the Pracheta's sacrificial arena is that he's eager to talk about Dhruva. This eagerness is a sign of spiritual health, and lethargy is a sign of spiritual ailment, spiritual sickness. Just think in your life when you were eager to do something. It electrified your day, electrified your night. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. Tomorrow, this is going to happen. Tomorrow, that's going to happen. Like I was talking with Navadip Leela, and he was telling me in a few days his daughter will be 9 years old. I asked her, are you going to have a party? So remember when you were so eager that your birthday was coming? What am I going to get? Eagerness is a part of life, material or spiritual. But somehow or other, we think that spiritual life doesn't involve eagerness. It just involves day after day, dragging your feet through your sadhana and trying to control your senses. But material life, well, that's got some awesomeness to it. That has some zip to it. And at times, there are problems, of course, but at least it involves some enthusiasm and eagerness. Whereas bhakti, after your first year or so, then you settle down into routine non-eagerness. Just like the materialists have the expression, another day, another dollar. So the lackadaisical devotees version of that is another day, another mantra. We want our spiritual health to be vibrant. Bhakti is exciting. So Narada Muni is conveying that excitement, that eagerness. And he wants you to also take part in it. So my point is, you have to show eagerness one way or the other. Often the question is asked to me, as it was asked at a gathering I attended yesterday at the home of Jayadev Kavi. Madhuryamrita. How do you maintain your enthusiasm? And I explain, you associate with those who are enthusiastic, because bhakti, eagerness, and enthusiasm is more contagious than COVID, Omicron, or whatever. If you associate with devotees who are in a slump, unless you're very strong and can motivate them out of the slump, you'll become affected in that way, especially if you don't recognize what is a slump. So we have to keep our spiritual intelligence sharp. Yes, sometimes devotees go through slumps, but you have to be able to recognize that so that you don't make their slump deeper, and then you also go deeper in your slump. Actually, no one really follows. No mothers chant all their rounds. No one does this. No one does that. Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Ki Jai, but they're in another universe. And then you're just reduced to the lifestyle of a religious believer. I believe in Krishna, or as I've often heard, Krishna's cool. I still believe in him. But where is your devotional service? So when there's no eagerness, this is what happens, just like a tire goes flat. Similarly, our devotional life can go flat by inattentiveness, and inattentiveness also refers to how we associate with others. So I was explaining yesterday that for householders especially, it can become difficult because the householder ashram is the social ashram. You're always socializing, neighbor devotees. You're always rubbing shoulders with someone. The Grihastha ashram is not a solitary ashram. Actually, no ashrams are solitary, but especially the householder ashram, you're always interacting with others. And these others are of different levels. So unless you are aware of the different levels, you can become bewildered. A tendency is just that we're all Vaishnavas, meaning we're all on the same level. And so whatever, this one's doing this, that one's doing that, I'm doing this and that. What does it matter, This is impersonalism. It's a symptom of being a Kanishta Adhikari, a third-class devotee, who recognizes the deity in the temple, or sometimes not even that happens. But a third-class devotee recognizes the deity in the temple, but can't distinguish among devotees who to listen to, whom to take advice from, who to take guidance from. It's just, they're all just a merge of devotees, mosh pit of devotees. But to make advancement to Madhyama Adhikari, the second class stage, you require discrimination. Now there's a fear that discrimination means false ego, and that by just considering everyone the same, that's humble, that's humility. So often devotees can be afraid to discriminate because they think, look, my next door neighbor is such and such devotee, or my children are associating with the children of such and such devotee. So whatever, we're all part of the bhakti mosh pit. Discrimination doesn't mean arrogance. It means you, just like in a medical facility, like we have our Dr. Nalini Kante. He distinguishes between various levels of illness amongst patients. those who are critically ill, those who are mildly ill, and so forth. No one tells him, all patients are the same, they're all in the same boat, give them all the same medicine, treat them all the same way. No, as a trained doctor, he's supposed to discriminate. This person's severely ill. That person is not. And he gives various prescriptions and routines according to the level of illness. So bhakti requires that kind of analysis. It doesn't mean you're unsympathetic and cold because you're discriminating. But you know what to expect from various levels of Vaishnavas. You don't expect the same quality of spiritual life from just everyone. And that means when you take advice, consciously or subconsciously, you consider what is the level of the devotee you're dealing with. That is your duty according to Shastra. It doesn't mean you're puffed up. Well, bhakti just means everyone and anything and whatever, and we got to live together.
Funny.
Yes, we have to live together.
Funny,
Part
funny,
of living together means
funny,
discrimination.
funny, 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 funny,
How to take input
funny,
for your life
funny,
means
funny,
discrimination.
funny, funny.
You respect everyone. Isn't that what Nectar of Instruction says? Upadeshamrita. If someone has taken Diksha, even their behavior may not be the best, you offer some respect. But you don't take impressions for living your own life. Oh, yeah, you're not chanting and you don't feel any difference? Oh, yeah, well, that's interesting. You haven't seen the deity in the temple for 3 years? Yeah. You haven't been zapped by a lightning bolt? Oh, that devotee does outreach, that devotee somehow there's distributing books, that devotee is doing this service, that service. Yeah, that's okay, We always need some fanatics. When you start making judgments like that, then there's been an infection. So again, if you're able, you try to bring up those who are in a slump. But if you're not able, you have to recognize that. It doesn't mean you're disrespectful. It means that you're cautious about taking inputs for your life. That's all. But no one actually follows, No grihastas follow the rules. When you take inputs like that, you get affected. Yeah, that's what everyone follows. No one follows. Great. And there's still devotees too. Okay. We are respectful to everyone. But what inputs you take for your heart, you're careful about. That's your duty. Again, we're not operating in a mosh pit, a merge. Bhakti requires discrimination based on wisdom, and you can't offload that responsibility, that individual responsibility. So yes, Narada Muni is talking about the greatest devotees. He's given you the history of Juru Maharaj. He's glorified Juru Maharaj in the assembly of the Prachetas. He's eager to talk about Krishna and Krishna's devotee. And now in this chapter, you have the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Vidura, who's hearing from Maitreya Muni, wants to know about the descendants. As we heard in text 1 of this chapter. After hearing Maitreya Rishi describe Dhruva Maharaj's ascent to Lord Vishnu's abode, Vidura became very much enlightened in devotional emotion, and he inquired from Maitreya as follows. So I've been meditating on this point. Vidura became very much enlightened in devotional emotion. Impersonalists think this is a disqualification of bhakti. When devotees chant and dance at various levels of ecstasy, impersonalists say, oh, these are fanatics, these are sentimentalists. They even said that about Lord Chaitanya. But bhakti is the science of spiritual emotion, and that science of spiritual emotion is the deepest science. It takes you far beyond religious belief. Actually, everyone likes to be emotional. The ladies readily admit it. The men try to hide from it. But everyone likes being emotional. So the bhakti science delineates all the different spiritual emotions. Some of them are rarely seen in this world. The emotions demonstrated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are there in the Shastra, and they're technically described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, although they're rarely seen in this world. But what is this world anyway? Just because they're rarely seen in this world, does that mean they're unimportant? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give the spiritual world and to teach us that the spiritual world is the most important reality. So as we become more advanced devotees, we relish hearing about the technology of spiritual emotion, all the various terminologies, classifications, because that's life in the real world, the spiritual world. We're so foolish to just wallow in material emotions and think that's the main reality. What are material emotions all about? Lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, and illusion. You can always trace your material emotions to one of those 6 plunderers. When you hear about the spiritual world, there are infinite expressions of emotion. So by hearing Nectar Devotion, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, especially hearing Chaitanya Charitamrita, you're hearing about the real world. So Narada Muni is eager. And now Vidura, because Bhagavatam is a collection of nested dialogues. One dialogue is nested within another dialogue. Shukadeva Goswami has spoken to Parikshit Maharaj. Sutta Goswami was in the audience. Sutta Goswami is now relaying the contents of that first dialogue. He's relaying it to the sages at Naimisaranya, headed by Shonaka Rishi. And now Maitreya is describing what Sutta Goswami said to the sages at Naimisaranya, and Maitreya Muni is describing it to Vidura. One dialogue within another dialogue within another. And Vidura is becoming enlightened in devotional emotion. And therefore, he's inquiring from Maitreya Muni. So he says, "Oh, greatly advanced devotee, who were the Prachetas? Who are those persons that Narada Muni was talking to at their sacrificial arena? To which family did they belong? Whose sons were they? And where did they perform the great sacrifice? So you may wonder why we are hearing about the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Because in a real human civilization, families preserve spiritual values. In the old days of Western so-called civilization, families stayed together and passed down property from one generation to another. But these days, that's out for the most part, because most families don't stick together. Properties are divided by divorce. In a real human civilization, not only is property passed down, but spiritual values, spiritual culture, spiritual potency. So we don't endorse spiritual qualification by birth, but the fact is that birth in a spiritually surcharged family confers extraordinary advantages. So sometimes, as we were discussing yesterday, the question comes up about devotee children. Parents sometimes are unsure. Should I train my child as a bhakta, or should I just be laissez-faire? Just whatever happens, happens. The child just has to approach life his or her own way. Because you've seen that there are cases where children of devotees, they don't immediately manifest devotional symptoms and may not do so in the lifetime of their parents. So therefore the parents get bewildered. And in this way, it's not simply that the children fall into Maya, but the parents also become affected. Well, in order to relate to our children who are in Maya, we have to be in Maya too. Otherwise, we can't relate to them and they can't relate to us. And in this way, the problems go deeper. The spiritual problems go deeper. So we explained that the parents do their duty, and duty in bhakti means for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of God. To be born in a family of devotees is the rarest birth in the material world, but still, that child has to come to a point sometime in life where he or she chooses to be a devotee. So it's one thing to be born in a family of devotees, but then there's the next thing of consciously choosing. Sometimes parents assume because the child has been born in a family of devotees, automatic pilot, bhakta, automatic. And of course, the children of devotees, they hate that. Why are you putting all this burden of expectation on us? You were in Maya and then you became a devotee. You let us get burned out first, just like you did. You were no angel before. Why can't we do all the good stuff that you did before you became a devotee? And what can the parents say? Okay, you can trash yourself out and learn the hard way. Of course, not every child goes that route. But the point is, there's a difference in taking birth in a family of devotees and choosing. At one point, the child has to choose. It may not happen in the lifetime of the parents. But at some point, this is the guarantee given that If the child is conceived properly in bhakti, at some point in the child's life, the child will be a devotee. It may not be until the child is 60 years old or 70. Whenever I call my mother, of course, she's 94 now. And when will you turn to Jesus? You were my firstborn. I raised you in the Holy Spirit. When? I haven't given up. I'm still praying every day. Actually, every moment of the day I'm praying when you'll be saved. I always try to gently tell her, maybe your prayers are maybe they slightly become true. And then she says to me, do you remember your Bible verses? And I recite some Bible verses for her. Okay, what about the next verse after that? So she doesn't give up hope. She can't understand that her hopes may have been realized. So Dhruva Maharaj demonstrates utmost seriousness and determination in bhakti. He let nothing deter him. And his descendants followed in his line, like Utkala. You're going to hear about Utkala in this chapter, descendant of Dhruva Maharaj. He's a Mahabhagavat on the highest platform, but he acted deaf, dumb, and blind. He acted like an imbecile because he didn't want to be disturbed by any material formalities, any social considerations. So he's in the line of Dhruva Maharaj. So you're hearing about the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj because the family is glorious. And that is the real potential of family life. To establish a family line that generation after generation perpetuates Krishna Bhakti. The family becomes important, not simply because of biology, but because of their spiritual potency. So this is why Narada Muni is excited to talk about Dhruva Maharaj, and he's doing that amongst the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. He's reminding the descendants, like the Pratetas, this is what your family line, this is what your dynasty is all about. And Narada Muni's eager, he's excited. So again, let us remember, we have both benedictions, the Pancharatrika Marg and the Bhagavat Marg. We have the deity worship, and we also have the glorification of Krishna, hearing and chanting and spreading Krishna's glories. This is opulence. This is real wealth. One final point is about duty. Of course, as we were discussing last night, in a degraded Kali Yuga society as we have now, duty is a dirty word. No, your only obligation is to your own gratification. Sometimes when there is some social need, the leaders in Kali Yuga tell the people, do your duty to the nation, do your duty to your people. This is duty conserved in terms of animalistic conception. I am the body. This is my tract of land. So you get exhortations. Protect the fatherland, protect the motherland, or be kind. all these exhortations meant to elicit a sense of material duty. And it's getting harder and harder to do that, to whip people up on the material duty platform, because they've been trained to have no other obligation except to their mind and senses. Duty, it's just all about how I feel. I'm not happy right now. That's a problem. My duty is my own happiness. How I feel at this moment. So duty has become a very old-fashioned word. Your duty is just to try and satisfy yourself. Otherwise, what can your life be classified as? Psychologically abusive. If you're doing things that are not for your own sense gratification, this is abuse. And as soon as you say that, everyone just runs for the hills. Oh, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to get involved with that. Abuse. Because you're considering other options besides your own personal happiness at this moment. So is duty in bhakti such a horrible thing? Of course, we take our vows at initiation. That's duty. But what is the purpose of duty in bhakti? It's to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not just duty for duty's sake. We've got most of us have a real complex about duty for duty's sake. Maybe you had abusive parents. Maybe you had parents who didn't care. You've had relationships that didn't work out, and you don't want the word duty thrown in your face because it restricts all your options. You want to feel that I can just do whatever I like, what I see is best at the moment. That's my duty. And if you try to tell me anything else, you're being psychologically abusive. What does Bhagavad Gita tell us? Sway sway karmanya vidata samsiddhim labhate naraha. By executing one's prescribed duties, one can please the Supreme Lord. And of course, as we heard in the purport, Srimad Bhagavatam tells us, Swanustatasya dharmasya samsiddhi haritoshana. The perfection, the real purpose of duty is to see that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied. So it's not just, I'm doing my duty and that's it. I'm struggling to do my duty, agony, agony, agony. It's a chance to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you're acting according to Dharma. And the purpose of Dharma is not to make your life miserable and restrict all your happiness possibilities. The purpose of Dharma is to arrange that your life pleases the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is why Bhagavatam minimizes even perfect following of Vedic rituals, Vedic procedures, if there's no goal of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yes, the prachetas are performing yajnas, rituals, but the purpose is to please the Supreme. That's why Narada Muni is there. So in this way, we can meditate on our own situation in terms of how we associate with others and how we understand what duty is. All right. Any questions? Yes. He's asking how, in our associating with devotees, can we avoid being judgmental? Judgmental is currently accepted as a negative thing. Better to use the word discriminative. Judgmental means it has connotations of no compassion, no sympathy, just outright rejection. Unless someone's an offender, you don't do that. You have sympathy, but what happens if someone has a virus? You discriminate, right? You know the feeling, you're in a car and all the windows are up and some of the passengers start coughing. How do you feel? Judgmental. But it's positive judgmental. Because I don't want to be locked up in a car with the windows up with someone who's coughing, who knows what virus they have. So you start thinking what to do. Similarly, in our social dealings, we're not rude. I think this is a big misunderstanding, that to discriminate means automatically you're rude. You just have to know what to expect from this person or that person or that person and position yourself accordingly. It doesn't mean you're rude. I know one example. One of my godbrothers, he was invited to a wedding, and it was one of his friends' associates' third wedding. So the godbrother is kind of amusing, and he can come up with these things at the drop of a hat. So his friend or associate asked, "You coming to my wedding?" And he replied, "I'll be there for the next one." So it's a humorous way of, drawing some boundaries. Sorry, I can't come, but I'll be there for the next one. So he's acknowledging the invitation, but at the same time, he's positioning himself with some disapproval. So householders especially need to become expert at that. It's not that everything has to be swallowed, otherwise you're considered judgmental. Again, there's this notion that discriminating means to be rude, to be abrasive. You have to be tactful. And that's what Upadeshamrita is teaching you, how to be tactful in bhakti. When it comes to protecting yourself from a virus, you're very tactful. It could be your own family member who has a virus and you still take measures. That doesn't mean you're being rude. Any mother who's protective of her children knows that if someone in the household has a virus, you want to isolate that person somewhere in the house. That doesn't mean you're being rude. So this is what it means to be a second-class devotee, Madhyamadakar. Third-class devotee can't discriminate. It's all a mosh pit, all a merge of devotees. They're all the same. But a second-class devotee discriminates. And again, discrimination does not mean to be abrasive or rude. Just like if I talk to my mother about how spiritual life involves proper behavior, such as not participating in animal slaughter. Don't be judgmental. The Bible said, "Judge not lest ye be judged." So I said, oh, really, mother? So that means you can just eat anything and everything. Don't be judgmental. You can't discriminate based on what people eat. I said, okay, are you ready to eat your children? Oh, don't say that. I said, you're discriminating, you're judging. So I think this is a very necessary topic. Discriminating, that you discriminate doesn't mean you're being rude. You have to know how to deal with each devotee according to their level. That's your responsibility. That's intelligence. It may be in your own family you have to discriminate because we're all individuals at different levels of spiritual advancement. So you have to work things out. So you go on with your spiritual enthusiasm. Things can become very intricate if you don't understand the principle of spiritual discrimination. What happens if you get on the internet and have no way of discriminating? What is this? What is that? Oh, this, that, oh, the conspiracy, or the leaders of the institution. It never ends, right? I've got one email from one aspiring devotee in Canada, and he was explaining, when he first became aware of bhakti, he got on the internet and was overwhelmed. But he said, I approached a devotee who taught me how to filter the internet, how to get the good and avoid the bad. So he's learning how to discriminate. Otherwise, without discrimination, things can be overwhelming. Because Maya has its propaganda. As Prabhupada explained, you make propaganda against Maya, Maya will make propaganda against you. One devotee in Australia I was explaining this point to him, and he said, he's doing outreach in Australia, and he said, oh, it's already happened to me. I was cultivating someone, and then they just went rogue on me and made up a YouTube demolishing of me. And so I said, congratulations, you are now a recognized enemy of Maya. If you weren't doing anything, Maya would take no note of you. But as soon as you push against Maya and teach others to do that, there'll be a pushback against you. That's the way the material world operates. So the more we have devotees who can teach discrimination and demonstrate it in their life in a respectful, sympathetic way, the more we'll have mature devotees. Otherwise, if there's this notion that, oh, we're all Vaishnavas, Prabhu, this one may be doing that one may be doing that one may not be doing this or not doing that, but anyway, la-di-da. This is the sign of neophyte devotees. Any other questions? Yeah. Whenever Prabhupada would be asked that question, how can we be an empowered preacher, book distributor, this, that, the other? He said, chant your 16 rounds from beginning to end without interruption. And what's our response to that? Oh, but actually, Oh, we've heard that before. Is there something else? There's something. Let's move on. Quick, let's move on. Turn the page on that one. Yes, he jive, but yes. Speak loud, please. How do you do what, in a way? You develop your bhakti worldview by studying the Shastra, by associating with serious devotees, and you can always confer with your spiritual master if there's any confusion. That's Krishna's system. It's not the spiritual master's system. It's Krishna's system. The spiritual master is simply the servant of Krishna's system. Just like, let's say, Ashrayananda has 4 children. Suppose you're trying to instruct your children and they say, well, so-and-so at school says this, and so-and-so up the road says that. What do you say then? But why do you say it? Who are you? Who are you to be? Exactly. He says, I'm the father. Exactly. Yeah. That's why we have Srimad Bhagavatam class. And that's why you distribute books. They're meant to be read. And especially they're meant to be discussed in the association of others. So you have, where you live, you have 3 devotees, you can discuss the Shastra. You're all sincere devotees, so you can do that. This is why we have the books given to us by Srila Prabhupada. We can strengthen the intelligence. As I was explaining last night, many devotees come to bhakti with a good intent, with a good heart, but they don't develop knowledge. They can go on for some years with a good heart, nice intentions. They can be even very sweet, but sooner or later, they may hit a crisis because the material world means crisis, just like Arjuna in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And when they hit that without any knowledge, they can easily be thrown off track. Why did this happen? Oh, just like Arjuna in first chapter. Oh, Krishna, I don't know what to do, whether to fight or not to fight. I don't see any good in any of my options. But he approached Krishna, and Krishna enlightened him with knowledge. So in material life, they have an expression, nice persons finish last. In the Bible, there's the verse, the meek shall inherit the earth. Anyone heard that verse? Yeah. What is the Kali Yuga interpretation of that verse? Yes, the meek shall inherit the earth. They'll be buried 2 meters under. In the positive bhakti sense, the point is it's not enough to be nice. That's a great accomplishment. But the niceness has to be based on knowledge. Otherwise, sooner or later, you may get thrown by the inevitable crises of material existence. Family problems, problems with your spouse, problems with your child, societal problems, lockdowns, mandates, this, that, the other, wars. So unless you have bhakti knowledge, you can be thrown off track. And that's why part of our bhakti lifestyle is acquiring knowledge. Yes. What's the last sentence? And what? I missed a word. Well, if they're intelligent devotees who understand Shastra, then, but they can always check with higher ups. Association in bhakti doesn't simply mean peer association. It also means association with those more advanced. So that's the safety check in terms of what you're saying. You're speaking about the possibility of the herd mentality and it operating in an adverse way, yes? Well, there has to be someone above the herd. The herd can be good. It's not that always a herd is bad. If the herd is going in the right direction, all glories. It's great to be a part of a herd that's moving in the right direction. But if the herd is going in the wrong way or starting to get off course, then someone needs to be consulted who can give course correction. Just like when it comes to IT, I can read so many things on the internet, just like I asked you about lenses for an iPhone, and all the reviews said, yes, yes, this is great, great, great. And then I asked you, and you dug into the situation with your expertise and said, you came up with a thumbs down. So if I just followed what the herd was saying, in that case, I would have been disappointed. So I took it to a higher level. So you analyzed all the reviews on Amazon, discriminated between the fake reviews and the real reviews. I don't know how you do it, but you did it. And said, aha, I've discovered that in authentic reviews, they're saying the product is deficient in such and such a way. So in this way, I didn't submit to the herd mentality. I went above it. So that's how we deal in the bhakti life. You have some doubt, you ask. Yes. It's the onus on you to get proper guidance and proper association. Just like it's hard for many devotees to understand, if the spiritual world is so wonderful, unlimitedly, infinitely wonderful, how did we leave? It's hard for them to accept that this is the nature of independence that Krishna has given you. Otherwise, what is the meaning of independence? But no, everything was so wonderful. Everything was so nice. How did we leave? How could we ever leave? They just can't get it through their head. Independence means you can choose, even when everything is so wonderful, infinitely wonderful. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, what does Krishna say? Yadgatvadanavardhante, tadama paramam. Who knows? What? Tadama. Upon going there, you'll never return. So devotees ask Prabhupada, so that means once you go back to Godhead, you'll never come to the material world. And Prabhupada explained, if you want to, you can, but no sane person would. But still, because you have independence, having gone there, you can choose to come back. Otherwise, what is the meaning of independence? It's hard for us to accept that. How can I do such a thing? How could I have left the spiritual world? How could I make that choice? It's because you have independence. And then the next doubt follows. How could Krishna let me do that? But Krishna is not simply standing back, so to speak, and letting you do that. He's advising you all the time. But you don't want to listen. What happens if one of your children, God forbid, goes off the rails in his teenage years and becomes socially destructive? And then the child's later, when he's in prison, says to you, how could you let me do that? What would you say? I tried to help you. I didn't raise you this way. I raised you another way. So similarly, Krishna is always trying. And that's something I see devotees have a hard time accepting. Krishna is trying so much that he's not simply speaking Bhagavad Gita. He's going with you from body to body, no matter what body you take. Of course, he's unaffected by the material conditions of your body, whatever body you have, but he's going with you there as Paramatma, as Super Soul. He's sending his representatives. Just like when we send out book distributors, when we have public outreach programs, this is Krishna trying to influence your independence. But then you say, if there's God, where is he? Why does he let everyone suffer? The more you understand Bhagavad Dharma, the science of the Supreme, the more you can see how Krishna is always trying to help us. But when our eyes are blinded by ignorance, we have that mentality. Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you tell me there was danger up ahead? Krishna says, surrender to him, he'll protect you. Sanskrit in Bhagavad Gita is plain and simple and clear. As the super soul, Krishna is always trying to get you to turn to him, but we're very persistent. So the material world is a place where the pure spirit soul can undergo a material experience that actually never touches the pure spirit soul. It's the perfect setup for reformation. Anything else? Yeah. There are different levels of guidance. And so anyone who is inspired in their bhakti, why not listen? Be grateful. how to associate with devotees is what we've been speaking about, discrimination. You make friends with those on your same level, you show mercy to those beneath you, and you serve those above you. That's the Shastra principle. All right. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare